At the height of their power, the Ottoman Empire spanned 3 continents and was one of the most powerful and influential empires in the world. But how did an empire that once stood at the pinnacle of global dominance ultimately crumble? The rise of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was founded by Turkish people. They had come to dominate the Muslim world in the Middle Ages. The first Turks had settled in what is now modern Turkey following their victory at the Battle of Manzikert over the Byzantine Empire. Many Turks founded small states in former Byzantine lands. A group of Turkish tribesmen who quite sensibly fled the fearsome Mongols in the 13th century founded a small principality under the rule of Osman Gazi. He was the founder of the Ottoman dynasty. Osman's small principality was in the northwest of Anatolia and bordering the Byzantine territory. From here, Osman and his successor grew their state until they had surrounded the city of Byzantium. Under Murad I, who was the third sultan of the empire, the Turks crossed into Europe. By 1400, they had conquered much of the Balkans. In 1396, at the Battle of Nicopolis, they defeated a large army of Christian knights. However, the Turks did not have it all their way. In 1401, they were defeated at the Battle of Ankara by Timur, who sought to rebuild the once great Mongol Empire. He was a Turco-Mongol who had built an empire in Central Asia and became the most powerful ruler in Central Asia since Genghis Khan. The Ottoman Sultan Bayezid was even captured. But the Turks recovered, and by 1453 they captured Byzantium, which is now known as modern Istanbul, ending the Byzantine Empire. Because of this, the Ottomans claimed to be the rightful heir of the Roman emperors. By the 1500s, under Selim the Grim, the Ottomans used artillery to defeat the Iranians. After that, they conquered the Mamluk Empire in Egypt. They became the most powerful Muslim state on the planet. The greatest Ottoman ruler was Suleiman the Magnificent. He was the 10th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. During his reign from 1520 to 1566, the empire grew rich and powerful. At one point, the Ottomans conquered most of Hungary and even besieged Vienna. If they had taken Vienna, they would have taken Germany. This would have impacted the course of history in an unimaginable way. By the end of the reign of Suleiman, the Ottoman Empire controlled directly or indirectly most of the Middle East, the Balkans, Crimea, and North Africa. By 1600, the Ottomans had the mightiest empire with the strongest army and navy. Many thought the Turks would someday conquer all of Europe. There are 4 main reasons for the Ottoman Empire becoming a superpower. 1. The government of the Ottomans. The empire was ruled over by a sultan. They were all descendants of a sultan named Osman, and one of the sultan's sons inherited the throne. The sultan was an absolute ruler, and no one could question his orders. If you did, you could have your head cut off. Ottoman rulers owned the land and gave it to those who served in their army or government, at least in the early centuries, which made their empire very unified, unlike the rest of Europe. One sultan came up with a shocking idea to ensure that wars among his sons wouldn't break out after his death. He passed a law allowing a new sultan to kill his brothers. Mehmed III killed 19 of his brothers, many only babies. This was brutal, but it meant that the Ottomans had no civil wars after a ruler died. The Ottoman Sultan was head of the Islamic faith and had the title of Caliph. He saw his role as protecting and promoting Islam. That is why so many Muslims obeyed his word and were prepared to fight to the death for their sultan. 2. The Ottoman military. The Sultan often led the army in person on campaigns until 1550. He had an army made up of professionals. It was made up of cavalrymen who served in return for grants of land like the knights in Europe. However, the secret of the Turks' success was the fearsome janissaries. These were soldiers and the slaves of the Sultan. They were typically the children of Christian families, usually taken away to be trained and educated to be soldiers or governors. These janissaries were elite troops and obeyed the Sultan unquestioningly. The Turks learned from their European enemies, and they adopted firearms and cannons. The Ottomans also had a massive navy. It was made up of galleys rowed by mainly Christian slaves. For its first few centuries, the Mediterranean Sea was turned into a virtual Ottoman lake. The Turks terrorized European shipping and coastal communities. This only stopped after the Turks' defeat by Christian powers at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. 3. The Ottoman economy. The Turk Empire relied on several important trade routes, such as the Silk Road. As Muslims, they respected traders and merchants, and this also helped their trade. The Turks' conquests helped them to become rich. Just as an example, Suleiman the Magnificent was much richer than Henry VIII of England. 4. Their tolerance. The Turkish Empire was tolerant. Muslims, Jews, and Christians mostly lived in harmony. Muslims had more legal rights, though. Jews and Christians had religious freedoms as long as they paid a jizya tax. The Christians in particular governed themselves in the millet system. The Ottomans were much more tolerant than the Christian kingdoms in the early centuries. For example, they welcomed the Jews who were expelled from Spain in 1492. This tolerance was good for the economy. The decline. During the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, it seemed that nothing could stop the Ottomans. But no empire lasts forever, as history has repeatedly shown us. Things started to go wrong after the death of Suleiman the Magnificent in 1566. The sultans who succeeded Suleiman did not leave their palace, which were in reality just luxurious prisons. Some went crazy or became drunks like Selim the Sot. Increasingly, the sultans were sidelined, and their wives or mothers were often the power behind the throne. Eunuchs became powerful in the court. Historians often called the period from 1533 to 1656 the Sultanate of Women. Many of the women proved to be excellent rulers, but the Ottoman Empire no longer expanded. Its enemies in Europe, such as the Austrian Habsburgs, became increasingly stronger. Because conquests became rare, there was less land and treasure to finance the government and army. The era known as the Sultanate of Women witnessed many natural disasters and famines, yet the empire remained strong, at least from the outside. In 1683, Turan Sultan died, and this is seen as the end of the Sultanate of Women. The Ottomans had never given up hope of capturing Vienna, and in 1683, they invaded the Habsburg land and attacked Vienna for a month. Just as it seemed that the city of Vienna was about to fall, it was saved by the sudden appearance of the Polish king and army, who destroyed the surprised Turkish army. If the Ottomans had taken Vienna, they could have invaded the rest of Europe. The Christian powers, led by Austria, Poland, Lithuania, and Russia, entered into an alliance known as the Holy League. This led to the Great Turkish War, during which the Ottomans suffered a string of defeats. At the Battle of Zenta, the Turks were ambushed and badly defeated. Following this, the Ottomans never seriously threatened Europe again. After the year 1700, there were some reforms and the economy grew. Ottoman society was more liberal than Europe. Coffee houses sprang up all over the empire, and the arts flourished. Throughout the 18th century, the wars with the Europeans and Iran never stopped. The Russians began to push the Turks back in the Black Sea area under the rule of Peter the Great. The Ottoman state was becoming weaker. The local elites in provinces such as Egypt began to break away slowly and often didn't pay taxes or send soldiers to the Sultan. The taxation system was also corrupt, and the Ottomans couldn't modernize their society because of the opposition of religious leaders. The Janissaries only obeyed the sultans if they were in the mood, and even killed several sultans. Things came to a head in the disastrous Russo-Turkish War of 1768 to 1774. As a result of their defeat, the Ottomans had to give the Russians Crimea and other lands. Then, they had to allow the Russians to act as the protectors of the Christian population in the empire. From now on, the Europeans felt free to interfere in the affairs of the empire, and many of the Ottoman Empire's vassals, such as in North Africa, were virtually independent. In 1797, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt and reached as far as Syria. The Ottomans needed the help of the British to defend themselves. This was how weak they had become. Following this, Muhammad Ali, an Albanian adventurer, seized control of Egypt and almost marched on the Ottoman capital. The Turks again had to be rescued by Europeans. What would Suleiman the Magnificent have thought? Western European ideas such as democracy and nationalism became popular among the empire's Christians. This led to the Greek War of Independence, which was won by the Ottomans in an alliance of European navies in the Sea Battle of Navarino. This led to the creation of an independent Greek kingdom. All the Christian populations wanted their independence. Over the 19th century, Serbia, Montenegro, and Wallachia gained independence. To halt the decline, the Turkish sultans tried to modernize. They bloodily ended the Janissaries and created a more modern army. They then started to introduce Western-style reforms and borrowed money from the West to finance these reforms. Ottoman Turkey even fought with the British and French in the Crimean War. In 1876, it seemed that the Ottoman Empire would become a constitutional monarchy like Great Britain. However, after another defeat to the Russians, they lost Bulgaria in 1878. This ended the reforms and modernization program. Abdul Hamid II, the 34th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, massacred many Christians, including Bulgarians and many Armenians. It was at this time the Turks were so weak that they became known as the sick man of Europe. The British and French propped up the Turks to stop the Russians from taking Istanbul. In return, the Turks gave them trading concessions, and the Europeans began to bleed the Ottomans dry. The army and others had enough. A revolutionary movement known as the Young Turks seized power. In 1908, the Sultans became the only figureheads of their empire. At the start of World War I, the Young Turks movement had the bad idea of joining the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians. After 4 better years of war and the mass killing of Christian minorities such as the Armenians, the Ottoman Empire surrendered. The victorious Allies partitioned the empire. Under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the Turks resisted this and established the Republic of Turkey. This was the end of the Ottoman Empire, and the last sultan was exiled in 1924. For over 600 years, the Ottoman Empire was a force in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. It decisively shaped the history and culture of the Balkans, the Middle East, and especially the state of modern Turkey. The Ottoman Empire influenced the world through its vast territorial expansion, its role as a bridge between the East and West, its contributions to art, architecture, and culture, and its impact on the development of the modern Middle East. What do you think were the key factors that ultimately led to the decline and fall of the Ottoman Empire? And how might its legacy still be relevant in today's world? Comment down below.